Good. I'm Darren Williams, and okay, so I'm going to start with the definition of democracy, according to dictionary.com, is a government by the people and a form of government in which the supreme power is invested in the people and exercised directly by them or by their elected agents under a free electoral system. And the claim of thought that I'm going to be pursuing with is unregulated campaign donations undermine the American democratic system. So the first point that I'm going to start off with is that unregulated campaign donations result in a government that is less representative of the general public. The wealthy heavily influence the party, and by wealthy I'm referring to businesses, individual donors, and companies. And these entities form PACs, which are known as political action committees. And traditionally, PACs have been limited to a certain amount of money that they can pull in. And after the Supreme Court case of Citizens United in 2010, the PACs were basically able to accept unlimited contributions from individual donors. And because of that, it led to something called a super PAC. And these super PACs basically they could accept unlimited amounts of money from entities, and it wouldn't be questioned where they got it from. And the Citizens United case also gave companies the same rights as citizens, and money was also formed as a form of speech. Yeah. So Peter Overby of NPR, he stated that super PACs were mandatory accessories for presidential candidates in 2012, often running devastating attack ads that the candidates' campaigns preferred to avoid. And the biggest rules that super PACs must follow were the fact that they couldn't communicate with individual candidates. That was illegal, but under that premise, it's difficult to prove and prosecute that it actually occurred. And so the wealthy have the best opportunities to win elections, and campaigns need money in order to function. You have to pay for hotel fees, travel costs, ads, fundraisers, and these all add up, so money's always going to be a factor. And Wesley Laurie, congressional national politics reporter from the Washington Post, mentioned that in a study which analyzed 567 congressional races in 2012, and it found that candidates who out-fundraised opponents were 9 times more likely to win elections in 2012. Winning congressional candidates outspent their opponents by 20 to 1. Winning candidates on average spent 2.3 million, losing candidates on average spent 1.1 million. And incumbency also has a factor, because you already went through the process of creating outlets to bring money in, so when the time comes for re-election, all you do is call up those individuals that gave you the money, and you're able to run on that. To whereas someone who's a first timer has to bring about those resources through time. And in the 2012 presidential campaign, Obama spent over 1.1 billion, and Romney spent between 1 to 1.1 billion. And after this process has all occurred, the American people are left to vote for whoever the PACs have backed and placed as representatives for the parties. My second point would be that money in politics leads to political gridlock. Lobbyist groups control politicians. Donors give to campaigns in hopes that the candidate will win and their voice be heard. The purpose of giving to a campaign and a candidate that you support is to help them win, because a candidate has a policy that you agree with. And an example of this would be if a donor basically contributed to Obama's campaign, and Obama was running on the idea of universal health care. When he gets elected, those same donors are expecting him to implement policy towards universal health care. And in an article by Sal Gentile, who was a PBS reporter, he said that this explosion in spending fuels the growing public concerns that judges will favor the biggest spenders. That will mean an increasing special interest pressure on judges and increasing public concern for justice is for sale. And this is not only an issue for judges, but congressmen and the president himself. And the organizations that spend the most money on various issues, which are special interest groups, they have the biggest voices in Washington. And in an article from the Huffington Post discussing the NRA's lobbying power in the wake of numerous recent mass shootings, Ben Hallman stated that, but donations from true believers and the support from gun makers have helped to make the NRA into a wealthy, potent political force that it is today. The NRA pumps twice as much money into lobbying national elected officials as its rivals. These people are not going to have a change of heart, nor in partisan America do lawmakers in conservative districts feel the pressure from gun control advocates who are largely based in northeastern cities. And gridlock basically creates a bad political climate. Congressional approval is at 14%, and in 2013 it was at 9%, which led to a government shutdown. And Americans basically don't believe that Congress is doing their job. And these historically low congressional ratings have occurred after the Citizens United case, which is an important factor. And congressional men and women are working to please their donors, especially in times where re-election is sought, which has resulted in a failure to compromise with the opposite parties and their different viewpoints. And this mentality has led to government shutdowns, which once again occurred in 2013. And for my third point, the poor regulation of campaign donations conflicts with the Founding Fathers' intentions. Policies like tax cuts get implemented that cater to the wealthy. These policies are implemented at the cost of the masses. An example would be economic policies that increase the wealth gap in the middle and upper class. And money may be a form of free speech. However, there are numbers of examples of free speech that are basically banned because in order to protect the masses. And one example of that is a terrorist threat. And the U.S. was founded as a republic. As a country, we were built on the representation of the people. In the Federalist 52 papers written by James Madison, he stated that the branch of federal government, speaking of Congress, should be dependent on the people alone. And the government relied on sole dependency of the people in order to protect the interests of the public good. And this dependency of funders conflicts with the dependency of the people, and as long as the funders are not representative of the people, it's never going to work. The average person can contribute nowhere near the amount as a corporation, and so that concludes my speech.
All right, Darren, the definition of democracy as an attention device was fine. You clearly state what the proposition is. It sounds like you're going to give us a preview, but it ends up not really being a preview, but rather an explanation of what PACs and super PACs are. And so I don't really get a setup of what the structure is going to be. In the body of the speech, I do hear some signposts for secondary claims, so that does help structure things a little bit more clearly. And I think your argument would make more sense if you were able to preview it, and then we could see how all of these points are going to fit together. At the end, there's not quite the summary that you need to have to make the point that you're talking about, but I think that that people will understand the point you're making, but you need to sell it a little bit more. In the body of the speech, there's a lot of information that you present. Some of it is definitely connected to the point that you're making when you talk about money, and you've got some statistical correlations with how likely it is that somebody's going to be elected based on the spending. I can see that that's definitely applicable. There's some stuff that talks about how Congress doesn't act effectively. You got the government shutdown, and I don't see any relationship to the money issues that you're talking about there. So I'm not quite sure how you got to that particular point. I think that needs to be explained a little bit more. When you talk about policies that are going to benefit a particular group of people, and you mention the wealthy, for instance, all we have is a hypothetical there on some tax policy that's not really identified. It would be more useful if you could say, here's a policy that clearly goes against the interests of all Americans and favors just those people that were donors to whatever organization or whatever political group is responsible for doing that, whether it is the Affordable Care Act or something else. That's the one that you mentioned in that situation. Then let's see some data that shows, for instance, that all the insurance companies donated to Obama because they wanted this, and then they got the Affordable Care Act, which is what they were really looking for, that's going to guarantee that everybody has to buy their product. That would be an example, for instance, that would fit in that category. The problem, of course, is that happened before Citizens United, so the notion that money influencing politics as a result of the Citizens United decision, I think, ignores a long history of money having influence in politics. You're saying that this is something that's unique and something that we ought to be concerned about. You need to explain what's really unique about it, because these are the same kinds of arguments I heard. When I was debating in high school in 1973 about money in politics and all of the kinds of stuff that goes on there, and I'm going, people are making the same kinds of claims that it's influence peddling, that there's a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of scenario, that the people who have the most money are the ones who win the elections and that kind of thing, and so that doesn't sound particularly new and unique, and so you need to develop that argument a little bit more. I thought you did a nice job speaking for the most part. You did go a little overtime, so we're not going to decapitate you or anything, but